You know what nobody talks about? Right now, while 120 million people are planning their Super Bowl Sunday like it's a national holiday, there's this massive shadow population who genuinely could not care less. And I'm not talking about people who pretend not to care to seem cool or edgy. I mean folks who see all the Super Bowl hype the exact same way you might see competitive cheese rolling or professional tag. Just complete, genuine emotional neutrality. And here's the thing that's actually fascinating from a psychological perspective. These people aren't broken. They're not missing some crucial human experience. Their brains are just wired to find meaning, excitement, and community in completely different places. And when you dig into the neuroscience and psychology behind it, you realize that caring about sports isn't some default human setting we're all born with. It's actually a really specific combination of factors that have to align perfectly, and for millions of people, those factors just never clicked into place. So today, we're diving deep into the psychology of people who don't care about the Super Bowl, and I promise you, by the end of this, you're going to understand something fundamental about how human brains create meaning in wildly different ways. Let me start with something that might blow your mind. When sports psychologists study what happens in people's brains during big games, they find something incredible. The neural activation patterns in fans watching their team play are remarkably similar to the patterns you see when people are actually playing the game themselves. Your mirror neurons are firing, your amygdala is processing the emotional stakes, your reward system is primed for that dopamine hit when your team scores. It's a full neurological experience happening in your brain, even though you're sitting on a couch eating nachos. But here's where it gets interesting. Not everyone's brain responds to sports stimuli the same way. And I mean that literally, neurologically, measurably different. There's research from the Journal of Consumer Psychology that identified something called optimal stimulation level. And people vary dramatically on this spectrum. Some brains crave high-intensity, emotionally charged, unpredictable experiences. Other brains find that exact same intensity genuinely aversive, even anxiety-inducing. Neither is better or worse, they're just different operating systems. So when someone tells you they don't care about the Super Bowl, they might not be trying to be contrarian. They might just be someone whose nervous system finds lower intensity experiences more rewarding. The chaos, the emotional swings, the manufactured drama of a 3-hour game with constant momentum shifts that might feel exhausting rather than exhilarating to them. It's not a choice, it's neurobiology. Now let's talk about tribalism, because this is where sports fandom gets really primal. Humans evolved as tribal creatures. We survived as a species because we formed tight-knit groups and competed with other groups for resources. Sports tap directly into those ancient neural pathways. When your team wins, your brain releases the same neurochemicals as if you personally accomplished something significant. There's actually a term for this: basking in reflected glory, or BIRGing in psychology literature. Fans literally experience their team's success as their own success. Testosterone levels actually rise in male fans when their team wins and drop when they lose. Your sense of self temporarily merges with the collective identity of your team. It's fascinating and deeply rooted in our evolutionary psychology. But, and this is crucial, not everyone experiences that tribal pull with equal intensity. Some people get their sense of belonging and community from book clubs, online forums about mechanical keyboards, local theatre groups, or literally any other social structure that doesn't require memorizing quarterback statistics. They're not rejecting community or tribalism itself. They've just found those needs met elsewhere, in spaces that resonate more authentically with who they are. Here's another psychological factor nobody really discusses: locus of control. This is a core concept in psychology that describes whether people tend to focus their energy on things they can directly influence, or whether they're comfortable investing emotionally in outcomes completely outside their control. Think about what happens when you watch a football game. You're screaming at a screen, you're wearing lucky socks, you might even have game day rituals you genuinely believe influence the outcome, but objectively, none of it matters. You have zero control over what happens on that field. For some people, that's totally fine. The emotional journey is the entire point. The lack of control doesn't diminish the experience. But for people with a strong internal locus of control, that same dynamic might feel fundamentally unsatisfying. Why invest 3 hours of emotional energy into something where your effort creates zero tangible outcome? They'd rather spend that energy on things they can actually influence. their work, their relationships, their creative projects. Neither approach is wrong. They're just different psychological tendencies that shape how people choose to spend their finite attention and emotional resources. And let's talk about something our culture desperately needs to acknowledge: overstimulation. Modern life already feels like a constant assault of notifications, deadlines, political chaos, financial stress, social media algorithms competing for your attention, and endless breaking news cycles. For a lot of people, the Super Bowl is just one more thing trying to hijack their attention and emotional bandwidth, and especially for people who psychologists identify as highly sensitive persons, which is about 20% of the population, by the way. Super Bowl parties are basically 3-hour sensory endurance tests. The noise, the crowds, the constant stimulation, the emotional intensity. What registers as fun for one nervous system registers as overwhelming for another. These folks might leave a Super Bowl party feeling completely drained for days afterward. That's not antisocial behavior. That's just a different nervous system responding to environmental stimuli differently. Here's something else that flies under the radar: uncertainty tolerance. There's solid research showing that people vary dramatically in how comfortable they are with unpredictability and ambiguity. Sports are fundamentally uncertain. You never know what's going to happen, and for fans that's the entire thrill. The suspense is the point. But for people with lower uncertainty tolerance, that same unpredictability doesn't feel thrilling. It feels stressful. They're not enjoying the suspense. They're just uncomfortable the entire time. And when you combine that discomfort with the fact that the outcome literally doesn't matter to your actual life, sitting through 3 hours of manufactured tension for zero practical payoff starts to feel less like entertainment and more like voluntary anxiety. It's the exact same reason some people love horror movies and others can't stand them. Different nervous systems have fundamentally different relationships with stress and uncertainty, even when it's just simulated stress for entertainment purposes. Now let's address the elephant in the room: cultural pressure and tradition. The Super Bowl isn't just a football game anymore. It's this massive cultural production. The commercials have their own hype cycle. The halftime show is a standalone event. There are themed snacks, elaborate parties, office pools, social media discourse. It's a full cultural phenomenon. And if football doesn't really resonate with you, all that extra cultural weight makes the experience worse, not better. You're surrounded by people who are genuinely invested in something you find completely random. Everyone's analysing the commercials, everyone has strong opinions about the halftime performance, and you're expected to participate, to have takes, to join the cultural conversation. For people who don't care, that whole dynamic can feel performative and alienating. You end up watching everyone else get emotionally activated by something your brain just doesn't process as meaningful. And that disconnect, being physically present but emotionally absent from a shared experience everyone else is deeply invested in, can actually feel pretty lonely in a way that's hard to articulate. But here's something I think is really important to acknowledge. Sometimes there's no deep psychological explanation at all. Sometimes people just don't like football the same way some people don't like cilantro or jazz music or true crime podcasts. We've become so obsessed with pathologizing every preference difference that we forget humans simply have different tastes. That's it. That's the whole explanation sometimes. The person who doesn't care about the Super Bowl might be absolutely passionate about Formula One racing, Olympic curling, professional esports, or literally anything else. That preference doesn't need neurological justification, it's just personal taste. The cultural expectation that everyone should care about this one specific sporting event is honestly stranger than individual people not caring about it. What I find most psychologically revealing is how uncomfortable it makes people when someone says they don't care about the Super Bowl. There's often this immediate defensiveness, like you've insulted their family, and that reaction tells you everything about how sports function as identity markers in our culture. When you say you don't care about the Super Bowl, some people don't hear, "I don't enjoy this particular form of entertainment." They hear, "I'm rejecting you, your values, and your entire social world." It's not actually about the game itself. It's about belonging, shared cultural experience, and maybe some underlying anxiety that if too many people opt out, the whole thing loses its meaning and cultural weight. Sports fandom creates in-groups and out-groups. When you position yourself outside that in-group, even passively by just not participating, it can trigger defensive reactions from people whose identity is partially built on that shared fandom. Here's another angle worth exploring: the economics of attention. Your attention is genuinely valuable. Advertisers literally pay millions of dollars for 30 seconds of Super Bowl viewer attention. In our modern attention economy, choosing where to invest your focus is actually a significant decision. For people who don't care about the Super Bowl, those 3+ hours represent time they could spend on things that feel more personally meaningful. Reading, creating something, spending quality time with family, working on projects they care about, or even just resting. When you genuinely don't get value from watching football, the opportunity cost of Super Bowl Sunday becomes really apparent, and there's no moral superiority in either direction. Someone who spends Sunday watching the game isn't wasting time if they genuinely enjoy it and find community in that shared experience. Someone who spends Sunday doing literally anything else isn't wasting time if that activity feels more aligned with their values and interests. Time is only wasted when you spend it on things that don't resonate with you, whatever those things might be. Let's also talk about how gender socialization plays into this. Historically, sports fandom, especially football, has been heavily coded as masculine in American culture. Boys are often socialized from early childhood to care about sports, to know team names and player stats, to bond with fathers and peers through shared sports viewing. People who didn't receive that socialization, whether because of gender, cultural background, or just family culture, might never develop those neural pathways that link sports viewing with belonging, masculinity, or social connection. They're not missing anything. They just weren't programmed with that particular cultural software. And here's something that might surprise you. There's actually research on something called sports apathy, and it's more common than you'd think. Studies suggest that somewhere between 30 to 40% of Americans report little to no interest in sports generally. These aren't people who actively dislike sports. They just feel neutral about them. Sports exist in their world the same way opera or quilting or cryptocurrency might exist. Something other people care about that just doesn't register as personally relevant. Now, if you're someone who doesn't care about the Super Bowl, there's probably a mix of factors at play. Maybe your optimal stimulation level runs lower, and you find the intensity overwhelming rather than exciting. Maybe you have a strong internal locus of control and prefer investing energy in outcomes you can influence. Maybe you're highly sensitive and find the sensory experience exhausting. Maybe you have lower uncertainty tolerance and find the unpredictability stressful rather than thrilling. Maybe you just never developed the cultural programming that links football with belonging and identity. Or maybe you genuinely just find it boring, and that's the entire explanation. All of those are completely valid ways to exist as a human being, and if you're someone who lives for the Super Bowl, who plans their whole Sunday around it, who feels genuine joy and community in that shared experience, that's equally valid. We don't all have to experience the world identically. In fact, we can't. Our brains are literally wired differently based on genetics, environment, experiences, and countless other factors. The beautiful thing about human diversity is that you can have 120 million people emotionally invested in a football game, while another massive group is perfectly content reading, hiking, creating art, spending time with family, or doing literally anything else, and somehow we all coexist in the same society. The problem isn't people who care about the Super Bowl. The problem isn't people who don't care about the Super Bowl. The problem is the expectation that everyone should experience cultural events the same way, with the same intensity for the same reasons. That expectation ignores everything we know about neurodiversity, personality psychology, and human individual differences. Your brain is going to find meaning where it finds meaning. For some people, that's sports. For others, it's music, art, nature, relationships, intellectual pursuits, creative work, or any of 1,000 other domains where humans can experience flow, community, and transcendence. The Super Bowl is just one option in an infinite menu of ways to spend your time and attention. If it resonates with you, that's great. If it doesn't, that's equally great. Neither choice makes you more or less human, more or less connected, more or less normal. So here's my challenge for you. Whether you're watching the Super Bowl this Sunday or doing literally anything else, respect the psychological diversity of the people around you. If someone tells you they don't care about the game, don't take it personally. Their brain just finds meaning elsewhere, and if someone is deeply invested in their team, don't dismiss that as trivial. Their brain is having a genuine, meaningful experience, even if you don't share it. We're all just trying to find connection, meaning, and moments of joy in this weird existence. We're just taking different paths to get there. If this analysis resonated with you, Whether you're a Super Bowl superfan or someone who's never watched a full game, hit that subscribe button. I dive deep into the psychology behind cultural phenomena, social behaviour, and why humans do the fascinating things we do. And if you want to support this kind of content, consider becoming a channel member. Your support genuinely makes these deep dives possible. Drop a comment and let me know. Are you watching the Super Bowl this Sunday, or are you team I'll be doing literally anything else? No judgment either way. I'm genuinely curious about the psychology of this community. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.